The champagne flute trembled in Sienna's hand as she navigated through the crowded ballroom of the Whitmore Hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across marble floors, and the air hummed with conversations in languages she couldn't place. She shouldn't have come. Her best friend Margaret had insisted. "You need this, Sienna. One night away from that suffocating gallery won't kill you." But now Margaret was nowhere to be found, probably tangled up with that Swiss banker she'd been eyeing all evening. Sienna adjusted the strap of her emerald silk dress, suddenly too aware of how the fabric clung to her curves. At 26, she'd spent the last 3 years building her career as an art conservator, more comfortable with Renaissance paintings than with rooms full of the wealthy elite. But the charity gala had drawn collectors from across the country, and Margaret had convinced her that networking was essential. So far, she'd managed to spill champagne on her clutch and accidentally insult a senator's wife by correctly identifying her vintage Chanel as a reproduction. The ballroom felt too warm, too loud. She needed air. Sienna pushed through a side door, finding herself in a quieter corridor lined with private rooms. The music became muffled, replaced by the click of her heels on polished stone. She walked until she found a partially open door, revealing what looked like a study, all dark wood and leather, blessedly empty. She slipped inside, closing the door behind her with a soft click. The room smelled of aged whiskey and something else, sandalwood, maybe cedar. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 2 walls, filled with volumes that actually looked red rather than decorative. A massive desk dominated one corner, and near the fireplace sat an arrangement of furniture that looked criminally comfortable compared to standing in 4-inch heels. Sienna made her way to the leather armchair positioned at an angle to the fireplace, but in the dim lighting, she misjudged its position. What she thought was the seat of an empty chair turned out to be occupied by something much warmer, much harder, and unmistakably human. She landed directly in someone's lap. Strong hands caught her waist instantly, steadying her, and a voice, low, dark as smoke, spoke directly against her ear. "Don't move." Every muscle in Sienna's body locked. The hands at her waist weren't groping or pushing her away. They simply held her in place with absolute certainty, the way someone might hold a skittish animal. She could feel the solid muscle of thighs beneath her, the warmth of a broad chest against her back, and the whisper of breath against her neck that made every nerve ending come alive. She started, but those hands tightened fractionally. "I said don't move." There was no anger in the voice, but something that made obedience feel less like a choice and more like inevitability. "There are 3 men standing outside that door. They're looking for me. If you move, if you make a sound, they'll come in here, and your evening will become significantly more complicated." Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to look at him, to see who this person was, but she found herself frozen, aware of everything. The expensive fabric of his suit jacket against her bare shoulders, the subtle scent of his cologne, the controlled strength in those hands that suggested he could move her anywhere he wanted but was choosing restraint. Outside the door, she heard them. Footsteps, voices speaking in clipped tones. "He's not in the ballroom. Check the east wing. Gregor wants him found, now." The footsteps paused outside the door. Sienna stopped breathing entirely. The man beneath her had gone utterly still, but she could feel the tension coiled in his body, ready to spring. One of his hands moved from her waist to rest lightly on her hip, not suggestively, but as a warning, stay exactly as you are. The door handle turned slightly. Sienna's eyes widened. Then a phone rang somewhere down the corridor, and the footsteps retreated, one of the men answering with a grunt. Their voices faded as they moved away. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Sienna became acutely aware of how she was positioned, sideways across his lap, her legs draped over the armrest, her weight resting entirely against him. She should have felt embarrassed, violated even, but instead she felt something else entirely. Something that made her pulse race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "They're gone," the man said, but his hands didn't release her. "You can breathe now." Sienna exhaled shakily. "Can I move?" "Can you?" There was something almost amused in his tone now. "I'm not the one who sat on a stranger in a dark room." Heat flooded her cheeks. I didn't know you were there. The chair looked empty. The chair was occupied. You didn't look carefully. She bristled at that, finding her courage. Maybe you shouldn't lurk in dark rooms at parties. Maybe you shouldn't wander into private spaces uninvited. The door was open. And that gave you permission. Sienna twisted to look at him finally, ready to deliver a sharp retort, and the words died in her throat. He was beautiful in the way that dangerous things are beautiful, all sharp angles and controlled power. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, with a jaw that looked hard enough to break her hand on. But it was his eyes that caught her. Even in the low light, she could see they were an unusual shade, gray, like storm clouds, and fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel like he was reading every thought in her head. He was younger than she'd expected from his voice, mid-30s, maybe, but he carried himself with the kind of authority that had nothing to do with age. Satisfied, he asked, one dark eyebrow arching. Sienna realized she'd been starring. She tried to stand, but his hands held her in place effortlessly. I should go, she said, adding how breathless she sounded. Probably, but he didn't release her. Instead, his gray eyes traveled over her face with the same intensity she'd just subjected him to, lingering on her lips, the curve of her neck, before returning to meet her gaze. But you won't, not yet. Excuse me. Those men who just left, they'll be watching the corridors. If you walk out of here alone, disheveled, clearly having been hiding somewhere, they'll stop you. They'll ask questions. You don't want them asking you questions. Something cold slithered down Sienna's spine. Who are you? The corner of his mouth lifted in something that wasn't quite a smile. Tonight, I'm the man whose lap you're sitting on. That's all you need to know. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. He finally released her waist, and Sienna stood on shaky legs, smoothing down her dress. He remained seated, watching her with that unsettling focus, completely at ease. What's your name? I'm not telling you my name. Fair enough. He reached for a crystal decanter on the side table, pouring amber liquid into a glass with steady hands. But you'll need to wait here for at least 10 minutes before you leave. Let them clear the corridor. I don't take orders from strange men. No, he agreed, taking a slow sip. You just sit on them. Sienna's face burned. That was an accident. Was it? Those gray eyes glinted with something that might have been humor. You're not a very good liar, Piccola. Your face gives everything away. I don't speak Italian. I called you little one. Don't worry, it's not an insult. You're, 5'6" in those heels? 5'7", she corrected automatically, then cursed herself for engaging. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face from merely handsome to something approaching devastating. Noted. Sienna crossed her arms, trying to regain some sense of control over the situation. You're enjoying this. Immensely. He set down his glass and stood, and she realized with a start how tall he was, easily 6'3", maybe more. He moved with the fluid grace of someone who knew exactly what his body could do, closing the distance between them until he was close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. It's not often someone surprises me. You surprised me. By sitting on you. By not screaming. By staying quiet when I told you to. By having enough sense to understand danger when it's right outside the door. His hand came up, and for a moment she thought he might touch her face, but instead he reached past her to push the door fully closed. The click of the lock sounded obscenely loud. Most people don't have good instincts. Yours are excellent. Or maybe I was just too shocked to scream. No. He was close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from him, could see the faint scar that traced along his jawline. You assessed the situation in seconds, weighed your options, made the smart choice. That's not shock, that's intelligence. Sienna's mouth had gone dry. She should move away, put distance between them, but her feet seemed rooted to the floor. The smart choice would have been not coming in here at all. But then we wouldn't have met. His voice had dropped to something lower, rougher, and that would have been a shame. You don't even know me. I know you're at a charity gala you don't want to be at. wearing a dress that's too expensive to be rented, but not expensive enough to mean you're comfortable in these circles. I know you came in here to hide, which means you're either shy or you're avoiding someone. I know you have the good sense to be cautious, but not paranoid enough to run from something you don't fully understand yet. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. And I know that your pulse is racing right now, and it's not entirely from fear. Heat pooled low in Sienna's stomach. You're very sure of yourself. I'm very observant. There's a difference. And modest. That almost smile returned. I've never found modesty particularly useful. Sienna forced herself to step back, breaking whatever spell had wrapped around them. I should go. 10 minutes must be up. Not quite. He checked his watch, something sleek and probably worth more than her car. But close. When you leave, turn right. Take the second corridor on your left. It'll bring you back to the ballroom through the south entrance. Less traffic. You seem to know this hotel well. I own it. Sienna blinked. You, what? The Whitmore, it's mine. Well, he amended. One of several properties I own, but this one is special. My grandfather won it in a card game in 1962. Family tradition at this point. She didn't know what to say to that. The Whitmore was one of the most prestigious hotels in the city, frequently hosting diplomatic events and society gatherings. The kind of place she could barely afford to have coffee in, let alone own. So you weren't hiding, she said slowly. This is your hotel, you could have just left. I could have. He moved back to his chair, settling into it with the easy confidence of someone completely in control of their environment. But I was having such a terrible evening until you literally fell into my lap. I decided to see where things went. You used me as a distraction. I gave you a reason to be here. If those men had found you alone, hiding in a locked room, it would have raised questions. If they'd found us together. He shrugged elegantly. Well, a man and a woman in a private room at a gala, not exactly suspicious. Sienna's stomach flipped. You would have let them think we were. If necessary, his eyes held hers. Would that have been so terrible? You don't even know my name. And you don't know mine. Sometimes that makes things simpler. Her hand found the door handle. She needed to leave, needed to find Margaret and get out of this hotel before she did something stupid. Like sit back down in that chair, in his lap, and find out what would happen if she did. Wait, he said, and despite herself, she paused. He stood again, reaching into his jacket pocket. For a moment, her heart stuttered. What was he reaching for? But he simply pulled out a card. Heavy stock, expensive, he held it out to her. What's this? Insurance, if anyone stops you. If anyone asks questions about where you were, who you were with, why you're disheveled, though you should fix your lipstick before you leave, Piccola, it's smudged, you give them this card. Tell them you were with me. They'll back off. Sienna took the card with numb fingers. It was black, with silver embossing. No name, just a phone number and a single symbol, a crown with a sword through it. Who are you? She asked again, quieter this time. He smiled, but there was something sharp in it now, something that reminded her that for all his charm, she'd heard those men outside the door. She'd felt the coiled danger in his body when they'd been close. Someone you shouldn't get involved with, he said, but I have a feeling you're going to anyway. Before she could respond, he crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, reached past her, and unlocked the door. His body caged hers for just a moment, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell that sandalwood scent that would probably haunt her dreams. Go, he said softly, before I give you a reason to stay. Sienna went. She walked quickly down the corridor, following his directions, her heart still pounding. She made it to the south entrance of the ballroom without incident, though she caught sight of 2 men in dark suits talking urgently into phones near the main entrance. She kept her head down, disappearing into the crowd. She found Margaret near the bar, laughing with her Swiss banker. There you are, Margaret grabbed her arm. I've been looking everywhere. Where did you disappear to? Just needed some air. Sienna's voice sounded strange to her own ears. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Are you okay? You look flushed. I'm fine, just tired. Can we leave? Sure. Let me just... Margot turned back to her banker, exchanging numbers, while Sienna's hand closed around the card in her clutch. She should throw it away. Forget this night ever happened. Go back to her safe, predictable life of restoring paintings and avoiding drama. But when she got home 3 hours later, after she'd changed into pajamas and washed her face and tried to convince herself it had all been some strange fever dream, she found herself pulling the card out again. Heavy, expensive, that symbol of a crowned sword catching the light. She turned it over. On the back, written in elegant script that definitely hadn't been there before, she would have noticed, were 3 words. Sleep well, Piccola. Sienna stared at the card for a long time, her thumb tracing the embossed symbol. Then she tucked it into her nightstand drawer and turned off the light. But she didn't sleep well. She dreamed of storm-gray eyes and dangerous smiles, of strong hands holding her steady, of a voice like smoke whispering against her ear. Don't move. And when she woke up the next morning, she knew with absolute certainty that her life had just become infinitely more complicated. The morning light filtered through Sienna's apartment windows, casting pale gold across the hardwood floors. She sat at her small kitchen table, nursing her second cup of coffee and staring at the newspaper spread before her. Page 6 featured a photo from last night's gala, various socialites and politicians smiling for the camera. She scanned the faces, looking for him, but came up empty. Of course. A man who owned the Whitmore Hotel and had people searching for him in the dark wouldn't pose for society page photographers. Her phone buzzed. Margot. Brunch today. You were weird last night. Spill. Sienna typed back. Can't. Have to prep the Castellano piece for authentication. It wasn't entirely a lie. The gallery had acquired what was purported to be a lost Castellano painting, and as their senior conservator, Sienna was responsible for verifying its authenticity. But mostly, she needed to be alone with her thoughts, to convince herself that last night had been an aberration, a strange moment outside of reality that wouldn't touch her carefully constructed life. She was still trying to convince herself of this when she arrived at the Ashford Gallery 2 hours later. The gallery occupied a converted brownstone in the Arts District, all exposed brick and careful lighting. Sienna had worked there for 3 years, building a reputation for meticulous restoration work and an almost supernatural ability to spot forgeries. Her workspace was in the basement, a climate-controlled room filled with specialized equipment, reference books, and the comforting smell of linseed oil and varnish. She was examining the Castellano under UV light when her boss, Gerald, knocked on the door frame. Sienna, there's someone here to see you. She looked up, surprised. I don't have any appointments today. I know. Gerald looked uncomfortable, which was unusual for a man who regularly dealt with millionaire collectors throwing tantrums. He's insistent, says it's regarding a private collection he'd like you to assess. Did he give a name? Just a card. Gerald held it out. Sienna's stomach dropped. Black cardstock, silver embossing, a crowned sword. Tell him I'm busy, she said, turning back to the painting with hands that weren't quite steady. Sienna, he's offering a substantial consultation fee, enough to fund the gallery's restoration program for a year. Gerald's voice took on a pleading tone. At least hear him out. She closed her eyes. Of course. Men like him didn't just own hotels, they owned everything, including, apparently, the ability to find her workplace and dangle enough money in front of her boss to make refusal impossible. Fine, give me 5 minutes. Gerald retreated, and Sienna took those 5 minutes to steady her breathing, to remind herself that she was a professional, that whatever had happened last night was just a momentary lapse in judgment. She washed her hands, smoothed her hair, and climbed the stairs to the gallery's main floor. He stood in front of a Vermeer reproduction, hands clasped behind his back, looking like he'd been carved from the same marble as the sculptures surrounding him. Today he wore charcoal gray, the suit tailored so perfectly it had to be custom. His dark hair was slightly less severe than last night, and in the gallery's natural light, she could see the sharp intelligence in those storm-gray eyes as he studied the painting. It's not real, he said without turning around, but it's a good copy. The light is almost right. Almost isn't enough. Sienna kept her distance, arms crossed. What are you doing here? He turned then, and that slight smile played at the corner of his mouth. Good morning to you too, Piccola. Don't call me that. What should I call you? You still haven't told me your name. Sienna. It came out sharper than she intended. Sienna Roth, and I'd like to know how you found me. You're wearing a gallery badge, and you mentioned being an art conservator to the senator's wife last night. Yes, I heard about that. Impressive that you spotted the fake Chanel. He moved closer, and she fought the urge to step back. There are only 3 galleries in the city with the reputation and resources to host high-level authentication work. I made some calls. You were at the 3rd one. That's borderline stalking. That's networking. He stopped a respectable distance away, but his presence still filled the space. I have a legitimate business proposition. And you couldn't have called. Would you have answered? No, she wouldn't have. They both knew it. What do you want? Sienna asked. I'm hosting a private exhibition next month. 20th century European works, some pieces that have never been publicly shown. I need someone to verify their authenticity and handle the conservation for display. Your boss seemed to think you'd be perfect for the job. There are dozens of conservators who could do that work. But I want you. The way he said it made heat crawl up her neck. Why? Because you're good at what you do, because you have a reputation for being thorough and discreet, and because... He tilted his head, studying her. Because I'm curious about you, Sienna Roth. That's not a professional reason. No, he agreed, but it's an honest one. She should refuse. Every instinct told her to walk away from this man and whatever dangerous world he inhabited. But before she could speak, he continued. The fee would be $50,000, half up front, half upon completion, plus expenses. The work would take approximately 3 weeks, some of it on site at my private estate. Your boss has already agreed to loan you out if you accept. $50,000. Sienna's mind reeled. That was more than she made in a year. It would pay off her student loans, give her a cushion, maybe even let her finally afford that apartment with actual closet space. What's the catch? She asked. No catch. I have art. You authenticate and preserve it. You get paid. There's always a catch with men like you. His eyebrows rose. Men like me. Men who own hotels and have people hunting for them in dark corridors. Men who carry cards with cryptic symbols instead of names. Men who can write messages on cardstock that wasn't there before. She pulled the card from her pocket, the one with Sleep Well, Piccola on the back. Want to explain that? Something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe even respect. You kept it. I kept it as evidence that last night actually happened, and I'm not losing my mind. And, did you sleep well? No. Neither did I. He moved to a nearby bench, sitting with that easy grace, and gestured for her to join him. When she didn't, he continued anyway. My name is Thuron Castlane. My family has been in the import-export business for 4 generations. We deal primarily in luxury goods, art, antiquities. Some of our methods are unconventional, which makes certain people nervous. Hence the men in the corridor last night. Unconventional how? That's not relevant to our business arrangement. It's relevant if I'm going to work for you. Thuron studied her for a long moment. Have you ever heard the phrase, provenance matters? Of course, it's everything in art authentication. Well, some of the pieces in my collection have complicated provenance. Not stolen, he added quickly, but acquired through channels that certain authorities might question. My exhibition needs to be above reproach, which is why I need someone with your reputation. Sienna's stomach nodded. You want me to legitimize your collection? I want you to verify that the art is genuine and properly preserved. What I choose to do with that verification is my business. He leaned forward slightly. Look, I'm not asking you to forge documents or lie. I'm asking you to do your job. If you find something wrong, you report it. Simple as that. Nothing about you is simple. Fair enough. He stood, closing the distance between them again. But the offer is real, Sienna. $50,000 for 3 weeks of work. You'd be doing exactly what you'd do for any other client. The only difference is that I'm paying you very well and some of the work happens at my estate instead of here. And what happens at your estate besides work? Whatever you want to happen, his voice dropped, or nothing at all, your choice. Her breath caught. This is inappropriate. Probably, but you're still considering it. He was right, damn him. She was considering it. $50,000. The chance to work with potentially significant pieces. And underneath all the rational justifications, something else. A curiosity about this man who'd held her in the dark and whispered against her ear, who looked at her like he could see straight through all her carefully maintained walls. I need to think about it, she said. Of course, take the weekend. Call the number on the card when you decide. He reached into his jacket. She didn't flinch this time and pulled out a folder. Preliminary documentation on the collection, so you know what you'd be working with. Sienna took the folder with numb fingers. You were very confident I'd consider this. I'm confident you're smart enough to recognize a good opportunity. Whether you take it, he shrugged. That's up to you. He moved toward the door, then paused, turning back. For what it's worth, last night when you sat down and didn't scream, when you stayed quiet and trusted your instincts, that took courage. Most people spend their whole lives playing it safe, never taking risks. I think you're tired of playing it safe, Sienna Roth. You don't know anything about me. I know you're here in this gallery instead of running away. I know you kept my card. I know you're still standing here, holding that folder instead of throwing it back at me. His smile was dangerous. I know more than you think. Then he was gone, the gallery door chiming softly behind him. Sienna stood there for a long moment, the folder heavy in her hands. Gerald appeared from the back office, practically vibrating with excitement. Well, did you accept? Please tell me you accepted. Do you know who that man is? Thuron Castellane, apparently. Castellane? Jesus, Sienna. His family owns half the luxury import market in the eastern seaboard. If you do good work for him, the recommendations alone would make your career. Or ruin it, if his unconventional methods come to light. Gerald waved a hand dismissively. Rich people are always unconventional. That's not your problem. Your problem is authentication and conservation, which I might add you're brilliant at. Sienna looked down at the folder. He said you already agreed to loan me out. Well, yes, pending your acceptance. The consultation fee he's offering the gallery alone would fund our restoration program for months. We'd be idiots to refuse. Gerald's expression softened. But it's your choice, Sienna. If you're not comfortable, we'll find another way. She knew he meant it. Gerald had always been supportive, never pushy. But she also knew the gallery was struggling, that funding was tight, that this opportunity was too good to pass up from a business perspective. I'll think about it this weekend, she said. That's all I ask. Sienna spent the rest of the day trying to focus on the Castellano piece, but her mind kept drifting to the folder sitting on her desk. Finally. At 4 o'clock, she gave up, packed her things, and headed home. Her apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls closing in. She made tea, changed into comfortable clothes, and finally opened the folder. Inside were detailed photographs and preliminary documentation for 15 pieces. Her breath caught as she flipped through them. A scale drawing she'd only seen in reference books. A Kandinsky from his Blue Rider period. What might be an early Rothko before his signature style emerged. Each piece was extraordinary, and each would require careful authentication. Tucked in the back was a note on heavy cardstock. Not the black card with the crowned sword, but cream-colored paper with a handwritten message in that same elegant script. The Skeel is my favorite. The way he captures longing in just a few lines, it's almost painful to look at. I'm curious what you'll see in it. T. Sienna set down the note, something twisting in her chest. This wasn't just about business for him. He actually cared about the art, understood it on some level beyond investment value. That made him more dangerous somehow. Easier to resist if he'd just been another rich collector looking for status pieces. Her phone rang. Margit again. Okay, seriously, what's going on? You've been weird since the gala, you're blowing me off, and now Gerald just called me saying you might be taking on some huge private commission. Spill. Now. Sienna sighed. Margaret was her oldest friend, the only person who'd stuck with her through art school and the lean years after. If anyone deserved the truth, it was her. Remember how I disappeared at the gala? Yeah, and came back looking like you'd seen a ghost. Not a ghost, a man. Sienna filled her in on the basics, the dark room, sitting on Thuron's lap, the men in the corridor. She left out the part about how his hands had felt on her waist, how his voice had made her skin prickle with awareness. Margaret was silent for a beat. Then, holy shit. Yeah. And now he wants to hire you. For a 3-week authentication project, $50,000. Margaret whistled. Okay, that's a lot of money. But Sienna, you have to be careful. A man who has people hunting for him, that's not normal. I know. Do you? Because you sound like you're actually considering this. Sienna looked at the folder, at the images of beautiful, potentially priceless art. The work is legitimate. The money would change my life. And he said I could report anything I found wrong. He's not asking me to lie. He's asking you to get close to him. That's what this is about. Maybe, but I'm not some naive kid, Margaret. I can handle myself. Can you? When was the last time you even dated anyone? You spend all your time with dead painters and crumbling canvases. This guy sounds like he eats people like you for breakfast. People like me. People who are too good for their own good. People who think everyone plays by the rules. Margaret's voice softened. I love you, but you need to be realistic. This man is dangerous. You felt it last night. That's why you were so shaken up. If you take this job, you're inviting that danger into your life. Sienna knew Margaret was right. She should refuse, should play it safe, should stay in her comfortable little world of authentication and restoration. But she kept thinking about Thuron's words. I think you're tired of playing it safe. I haven't decided yet, she said finally. But you're leaning toward yes. I don't know, maybe. Margaret sighed. Just promise me you'll be careful, and if anything feels wrong, you walk away. Money isn't worth your safety. I promise. After they hung up, Sienna made dinner, pasta with whatever vegetables were dying in her fridge, and tried to watch television. Nothing held her attention. Finally, she pulled out the black card, the one with the crowned sword, and stared at the phone number. It was nearly 10 o'clock, too late to call about business. She dialed anyway. He answered on the second ring. I was wondering if I'd hear from you tonight. No hello, no pretense. Just that smoky voice that made her stomach flip. I looked at the documentation, Sienna said. And? The pieces are extraordinary. If they're authentic, this would be the opportunity of a lifetime. They're authentic, but I need you to prove it. Why me? Really? There are conservators with more experience, bigger names. Thuron was quiet for a moment. She could hear something in the background, music, maybe classical piano. Do you want the professional answer or the honest one? Both. Professionally, you're meticulous, you're honest, and you have a gift for seeing what others miss. Your work on the Frontenac restoration last year was remarkable. You found evidence of a second artist's hand that 3 other experts had overlooked. Sienna blinked. How do you know about that? I did my research. I told you I'm very observant. He paused. The honest answer, because when you sat in my lap last night, you didn't flinch. You assessed, you calculated, and you made the smart choice in seconds. That kind of quick thinking, that ability to stay calm under pressure, it's rare. And in my world, it's valuable. Your world's being complicated, which is why I need someone I can trust to tell me the truth, even when it's inconvenient. You don't know if you can trust me. We just met. I'm a very good judge of character, Sienna. It's kept me alive this long. The casual way he mentioned staying alive made her shiver. What exactly am I getting into if I say yes? 3 weeks of authentication work. Some at your gallery, some at my estate in the countryside. You'll have full access to the pieces, all the equipment you need, and complete autonomy in your assessments. If you find a forgery, you report it. If you find something concerning about provenance, you report it. I won't interfere with your work. And outside of work, What do you want outside of work? It was the same question he'd asked at the gallery, and it still made her pulse race. Professional boundaries. Of course, his voice carried a hint of amusement. Strictly professional, unless you decide otherwise. I won't. We'll see. The confidence in those two words should have annoyed her. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in her belly. I need one more thing before I decide. Name it. The truth about last night. Who were those men? What were they looking for? Thuron was silent for so long she thought he might have hung up. Then, they work for a man named Gregor Vassal. He believes I have something that belongs to him. He's wrong, but he's not the type to take no for an answer. The men were sent to convince me to negotiate. Negotiate what? A painting, a Caravaggio that's been missing for 70 years. Gregor thinks my family acquired it during the war. We didn't, but he won't believe that without proof. And you're showing me your collection because if the Caravaggio were in my possession, you'd find it during authentication. When you don't, I'll have independent verification that Gregor is wrong. Maybe then he'll leave me alone. It made sense, in a twisted way. Or maybe you're lying and it is there, and you're counting on me to legitimize it. That would be quite a risk, wouldn't it? Hearing an honest conservator to find something I'm trying to hide. She could hear the smile in his voice. But I suppose you'll have to decide if you think I'm that stupid. I don't think you're stupid at all. That's part of the problem. Smart and beautiful. I'm starting to see why you've been avoiding relationships, Piccola. Men must bore you quickly. You don't know anything about my relationships. I know you haven't had a serious one in 3 years. I know you throw yourself into work instead. I know you're lonely, but you tell yourself you prefer it that way. Anger flared hot in her chest. You had me investigated. I had you researched. There's a difference. If I'm going to trust someone with my collection, I need to know who they are. That's invasive. That's survival. His voice turned serious. My world isn't like yours, Sienna. In your world, people are generally honest, and the worst thing that happens is someone tries to sell you a fake painting. In mine, people lie as easily as breathing, and the wrong decision can get you killed. So yes, I research. I verify. I trust carefully. It's not personal. It feels personal. Because it is, both things can be true. Sienna closed her eyes, phone pressed to her ear, mind spinning. This was insane. She should hang up, forget his number, tell Gerald tomorrow that she was declining the commission. Instead, she heard herself say, I want it in writing. The terms, the fee, the independence of my assessments. Everything. Of course, I'll have contracts drawn up tomorrow. And I want to see your estate before I commit. Where I'd be working, what security measures are in place, all of it. I'll send a car Monday morning, 9 o'clock. I haven't said yes yet. But you will, not arrogant, just certain. Sleep well, Piccola. He hung up before she could respond. Sienna set down the phone, heart hammering. She'd just agreed to visit the private estate of a man who was being hunted by someone looking for a missing Caravaggio, a man who'd had her investigated, who'd held her in the dark and made her feel things she hadn't felt in years. Margit was right. She was inviting danger into her carefully ordered life. But as Sienna climbed into bed that night, the folder of artwork on her nightstand and the black card tucked under her pillow, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. For the first time in 3 years, she felt awake. The car that arrived Monday morning was a black Mercedes with tinted windows and a driver who looked like he could double as a bodyguard. He opened the door without a word, and Sienna slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The drive took 40 minutes, leaving the city behind for rolling countryside dotted with estates hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. Sienna watched the landscape change, her stomach knotting tighter with each passing mile. She dressed professionally, gray slacks, a silk blouse, her hair pulled into a neat bun, armor against whatever she might find at Thuron's estate. The car turned onto a private road lined with old-growth maples, their branches forming a canopy overhead. At the end stood a house that made estate feel like an understatement. 3 stories of honey-colored stone, with wings spreading out on either side and gardens that looked like they required a full-time staff. It was beautiful in an understated way, old money, the kind that didn't need to show off. The driver opened her door, and Sienna stepped out onto gravel that crunched beneath her heels. The air smelled different here, cleaner, with hints of lavender and fresh-cut grass. Thuron stood on the front steps, dressed more casually than she'd seen him, dark jeans, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms that were surprisingly tan and corded with muscle. Without the suit jacket, she could see the full breadth of his shoulders, the lean strength in his frame. "Sienna," he descended the steps with that fluid grace. "Punctual, I like that. Your driver didn't give me much choice." "Marco is efficient," Thuron gestured toward the house. "Come, let me show you where you'd be working." He led her through the entrance, a foyer with a sweeping staircase and more art on the walls than most galleries possessed. She recognized a Monet sketch, what might be a Degas bronze, a stunning abstract that could have been a Miro. "Do you live here alone?" she asked. "Mostly. I have staff who come during the day, Marco, a housekeeper named Lucia, a groundskeeper. But at night, it's just me." He glanced back at her. "Does that make you nervous?" "Should it?" "That depends on whether you trust me." "I don't know you well enough to trust you." "Fair." He opened a door off the main hallway. "But maybe this will help." The room beyond took Sienna's breath away. It had clearly been designed as a conservation studio, north-facing windows for optimal natural light, temperature and humidity controls visible on the wall, examination tables with built-in lighting, microscopes, UV lamps, every piece of equipment she could possibly need. One wall was lined with storage cabinets, another with reference books. It was better equipped than the Ashford Gallery. "You built this for me?" she asked. "I built it for whoever I hired. That it's you is a bonus." Thuron leaned against one of the examination tables. "The pieces are in climate-controlled storage in the East Wing. You'd have access whenever you need. There's a separate entrance if you prefer not to go through the main house." Sienna moved through the space, running her fingers over the equipment. Everything was top of the line, meticulously maintained. This must have cost a fortune. Art is worth protecting properly. Cutting corners on conservation is how masterpieces get ruined. She turned to face him. "You really do care about the work." "Did you think I was lying?" "I thought maybe you cared about the investment." "I do, but not just the monetary value." He pushed off the table, moving to the windows. "My grandfather used to say that art is humanity's way of cheating death. Long after we're gone, our creations remain. They speak for us, tell our stories, prove we existed." He looked back at her. "That's worth preserving, don't you think?" Sienna felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't the dangerous man from the hotel or the calculating businessman who'd shown up at her gallery. This was someone who genuinely understood what she did, why it mattered. "Yes," she said quietly, "that's exactly what I think." Their eyes held for a moment too long. Then Thuron cleared his throat, all business again. "Would you like to see the collection?" The storage room in the East Wing was a vault, reinforced walls, a security system that would make a museum jealous, and climate controls that maintained perfect conditions. Inside, the 15 pieces were stored with meticulous care, each in its own protective housing. Thuron pulled out the scale drawing first, handling it with practiced ease. "This one came through my grandfather. He bought it from a dealer in Vienna in 1958, full provenance documentation." Sienna studied the drawing, a nude figure, all angular lines and raw emotion. It was unmistakably Skeel's work, that distinctive style that was both beautiful and unsettling. "May I?" He handed it over, and she carried it to a nearby examination table, pulling out a loupe to study the paper, the pencil strokes, the signature. Everything looked right. The aging of the paper, the characteristic pressure variations in Skeel's line work, even the slight smudging where his hand had rested. "This is extraordinary," she murmured. "Wait until you see the Kandinsky." They spent 2 hours going through the collection. Thuron knew the history of each piece, could discuss composition and technique with surprising insight. He wasn't just a collector, He was genuinely knowledgeable, and when Sienna pointed out details or asked technical questions, he listened with complete focus, filing away every word. "These will take time to authenticate properly," she said finally. "Provenance research, materials analysis, comparison with known works. 3 weeks might not be enough. Then take 4, 5 if you need." Thuron was replacing the last piece in its housing. "I want this done right, even if I find something wrong. Especially then, I'd rather know the truth than display a forgery." He closed the vault, the locks engaging with solid clicks. "Shall we discuss logistics?" They moved to what Thuron called the library, a 2-story room lined with books, with leather furniture arranged around a fireplace big enough to stand in. Lucia, the housekeeper, brought coffee without being asked, giving Sienna a warm smile before disappearing again. "If you accept," Thuron said, settling into an armchair across from her, "you'd work here 3 days a week initially, more if needed as the project progresses. Marco will drive you, or I can arrange for a car service if you prefer someone else." "I have my own car." "The drive is 40 minutes. If you're working late, I'd prefer you not driving tired on country roads in the dark." It was reasonable, but Sienna bristled anyway. "I'm not fragile." "No, you're stubborn. There's a difference." His mouth quirked. "But fine. Drive yourself if it makes you feel more independent. Just text me when you leave so I know you made it safely." "You're not my keeper." "No, but I'd still like to know you're safe. Is that so terrible?" Put that way, it sounded almost sweet. Sienna sipped her coffee to hide her confusion. "What about the exhibition? When is it and who's attending?" 6 weeks from now. It's invitation only, about 50 guests. Collectors, gallery owners, a few museum curators. The pieces will be displayed here, in the ballroom. You'd need to prepare them for exhibition and be available that night to answer questions about the authentication process. "You want me at the exhibition?" "You'll have done all the work. You should be there to present it." He leaned forward slightly. "Unless that makes you uncomfortable." "It's not typical for a conservator to attend private viewings." "Nothing about this arrangement is typical, Sienna. But if you'd rather not." "I didn't say that." She set down her coffee cup. "I'm just trying to understand the full scope." "The scope is, you authenticate and prepare 15 pieces for exhibition. You attend the viewing, you get paid handsomely for your expertise. Everything else," he trailed off, something unreadable in his gray eyes. "Everything else is up to you." There it was again, that suggestion of something more, left hanging in the air between them. Sienna's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "I want the contracts today. I'll review them with a lawyer before I sign." "Already done. Marco has copies in the car." Thuron stood, moving to the window that overlooked the gardens. "But before you decide, there's something else you should know." Her stomach tightened. "What?" "Gregor Vasil, the man whose people were looking for me at the gala." He turned to face her. "He knows I'm planning this exhibition. He's going to see it as a provocation, an opportunity to find proof that I have his Caravaggio." "Do you?" "No, but that won't stop him from looking. And if you're working here, if you're associated with me," he paused, "he might see you as leverage." I slid down Sienna's spine. "Leverage how?" "Nothing violent. Gregor's dangerous, but he's not reckless. More likely he'd try to approach you, offer you money to give him information about what you find, maybe try to convince you that I'm lying about the Caravaggio. And if he does, you tell me immediately. And you don't engage with him or anyone who works for him. That's non-negotiable, Sienna. These people are not like the art collectors you're used to dealing with." She stood, crossing to where he stood by the window. "You should have told me this before inviting me here." "I'm telling you now, before you sign anything, before you commit." His expression was serious. "I won't lie to you about the risks, but I also won't let anything happen to you. Marco isn't just a driver, he's trained security. Any day you're here, he stays on the grounds, and if Gregor or his people approach you anywhere, you call me. Immediately." "This is insane." "Yes, it is." Thuron reached out, and for a moment she thought he might touch her face, but his hand stopped short. "Which is why I'll understand if you walk away. The money isn't worth it if you don't feel safe. Sienna looked out at the gardens, the manicured lawns, the fountain in the distance. It was so peaceful here, so removed from the idea of dangerous men and missing paintings. But Thuron's warning was clear. That peace was an illusion. Accepting this job meant accepting risk. "What would you do?" she asked quietly, "if you were me?" "That's not a fair question. I've been living with risk my whole life. It's normal to me." "Then make it fair. Pretend you're someone like me, someone who plays it safe, who's built a nice, quiet life. What would you tell them?" Thuron was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it. "I'd tell them that safe isn't always the same as alive, that sometimes the things worth having require risk. But I'd also tell them to trust their instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is." "And what do your instincts say about me being here?" He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "My instincts say you're exactly where you're supposed to be, but my instincts are selfish. They want you here." "Why?" "Because you're brilliant and beautiful and you make me want to be honest, which is dangerous in my world. Because when you walked into my gallery studio and your face lit up at the equipment, I wanted to give you everything you'd ever need. Because—" He stopped himself, jaw tightening. "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since you sat in my lap and didn't flinch." Heat flooded through Sienna's body. "Thuron." "But that's my problem, not yours. You need to make this decision based on what's right for you. The work, the money, the opportunity, not on whatever this is between us." "Is there something between us?" "You tell me. You're the one who kept my card, who called me at 10 o'clock at night, who's standing here instead of running for your car." He stepped closer, and she could smell that sandalwood scent that had haunted her dreams. "What do you want, Sienna?" It was the same question he kept asking, and she still didn't have an answer. Or rather, she had too many answers, none of them entirely professional. A knock on the library door broke the moment. Lucia appeared, apologetic. "Scusey, Mr. Castellane. Marco says there's a car at the gate, no appointment." Thuron's entire demeanor changed in an instant, the softness vanishing, replaced by something harder, more alert. "Did they give a name?" "Vasil." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Thuron pulled out his phone, tapping quickly, and Sienna saw security camera feeds appear on the screen. A black SUV sat at the estate's gate, 2 men visible in the front seats. "Is that him?" Sienna asked. "Gregor." "No, his people, probably checking to see if I'm home." Thuron typed something, and she saw the gate remain firmly closed. "They'll leave when they realize they're not getting in." But they didn't leave. One of the men got out, walking up to the camera at the gate. He was huge, easily 6'5", built like he could uproot trees. He looked directly into the camera and smiled. "Tell your guest we'd like to meet her," the man said. "Just a friendly introduction, we'll wait." Sienna's blood ran cold. "They know I'm here." "Of course they do. They've probably been watching the house all morning." Thuron's voice was calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Don't worry, they won't come onto the property." "How do you know?" "Because that would be an act of war, and Gregor's smarter than that. This is just posturing." He turned to Lucia. "Tell Marco to stay alert. No one enters the grounds, and prepare the car for Ms. Roth." Sienna grabbed his arm. "I'm not leaving because they showed up." "You're leaving because our business here is done for today, and there's no reason for you to be drawn into this." His gray eyes met hers. "This is exactly what I warned you about, Sienna. They know you're here, they know who you are, and they'll use that however they can. If you're smart, you'll take the contracts, review them, and decline politely." "And if I'm not smart?" Something flickered in his expression, hope, maybe, or fear. "Then you call me when you've made your decision, but not today, not while they're watching." 15 minutes later, Sienna was in the back of the Mercedes, contracts in hand, watching Thuron's estate disappear behind them. The SUV at the gate stayed put, the huge man still standing outside it, watching them pass with that unsettling smile. Marco caught her eye in the rearview mirror. "Don't worry, Ms. Roth, they're just trying to scare you." "It's working." "That's because you're smart. Scared keeps you careful. Careful keeps you alive. He navigated onto the main road. But Mr. Castleane, he won't let anything happen to you. That man would burn the world down to protect what's his. I'm not his. Marco's eyes crinkled with something that might have been amusement. Not yet. The drive back to the city felt longer than 40 minutes. Sienna clutched the contracts, her mind spinning. She thought about the beautiful studio, the extraordinary collection, the $50,000. She thought about Thuron's warning, about the men at the gate, about the risk. But mostly, she thought about the look in Thuron's eyes when he'd said, "My instincts want you here." When she got home, she spread the contracts on her kitchen table. They were thorough, professional, and exactly what he'd promised. $50,000, complete autonomy in her assessments, a clear timeline. There was even a security clause that stated Marco would be available as protection during her work hours if she felt uncomfortable. Attached to the contracts was a note in that familiar, elegant script. "Whatever you decide, I respect it, but I hope you're brave enough to say yes. The world has enough people playing it safe." Sienna picked up her phone, pulled up Margot's number, then set it down again. She already knew what Margot would say, that this was dangerous, that she should walk away, that no amount of money was worth the risk. And Margot would be right. But Sienna thought about what Thuron had said. Safe isn't always the same as alive. She thought about the past 3 years, the careful life she'd built, the walls she'd maintained. Safe, predictable, lonely. She thought about sitting in a dark room with a dangerous man, her heart racing, feeling more awake than she had in years. She picked up her phone again. This time, she dialed a different number. He answered on the first ring. "Sienna." "I have conditions," she said. A pause, then, "Name them." "I want a panic button. Something I can trigger if I feel unsafe. That goes directly to you and Marco." "Done. What else?" "I want complete transparency. If there's anything else about this situation with Gregor, anything that might affect my safety, you tell me. No surprises." "Agreed. And I want it understood that this is strictly professional. Whatever you think you feel, whatever this thing is between us, it stays separate from the work." Thuron was quiet for a moment. "I can promise to try, but I won't lie to you and say I can control how I feel when you're around." It was more honest than she'd expected. "Then I need you to respect boundaries. I'm serious about this, Thuron." "I know you are, and I will." His voice softened. "Does this mean you're accepting?" Sienna looked at the contracts, at the note, at the black card with the crowned sword that she'd once again pulled from her nightstand drawer. "Yes," she said, "I'm accepting." She could hear the smile in his voice. "When can you start?" "Wednesday. I need tomorrow to settle things at the gallery and prepare." "Wednesday it is. Marco will pick you up at 8. "I'm driving myself." "Of course you are." That warmth again, almost affectionate. "Text me when you leave and when you arrive safely." "Thuron." "It's not negotiable, Piccola. Those are my conditions." Despite everything, Sienna felt herself smile. "Fine, but stop calling me that." "Not a chance. Sleep well, Sienna." He hung up before she could respond, leaving her standing in her kitchen, phone in hand, heart racing. She just agreed to work for a man being hunted over a missing Caravaggio. A man who made her feel things she'd sworn off 3 years ago. A man who'd warned her himself that this was dangerous. Margot was going to kill her. But as Sienna signed the contracts with a hand that barely trembled, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like she was choosing something that mattered, not just playing it safe, but actually living. Even if that meant inviting danger directly into her life. Even if that meant risking everything she'd built. Even if that meant facing whatever came next with a man whose storm-gray eyes saw right through every wall she'd ever constructed. She was done playing it safe. Wednesday morning arrived with gray skis that threatened rain. Sienna packed her equipment bag with meticulous care. Cotton gloves, magnifying loupes, pH testing strips, her notebook filled with preliminary research on each piece in Thuron's collection. She'd spent the previous day at the Ashford Gallery, explaining the commission to Gerald and organizing her existing projects so they could be handled by the junior conservators. Gerald had been thrilled. Margaret, who'd stopped by the gallery unannounced, had been less enthusiastic. "You're actually doing this," Margaret had said, watching Sienna pack. "Even after I told you it was insane. Especially after you told me it was insane." "Sienna, I know what I'm doing, Margaret. I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting." But Margaret's worried expression haunted her now as she loaded her car. The drive to Thuron's estate felt different in daylight, the autumn trees brilliant with color against the overcast sky. She found herself checking the rearview mirror more than usual, looking for black SUVs that weren't there. The gate opened as she approached. Thuron must have been watching for her. She texted him as promised, arrived, still alive. His response came immediately. "Good. Come to the studio, I have coffee waiting." The conservation studio looked even better than she remembered. Morning light filtered through the north-facing windows, and someone had placed a vase of fresh flowers on the corner desk. Not roses or anything ostentatious, but simple white lilies that filled the space with subtle fragrance. Thuron stood at one of the examination tables, 2 cups of coffee beside him. He wore dark slacks and a gray sweater that made his eyes look like molten silver. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. "You drove yourself," he said. "I told you I would." "I know, I just wasn't sure you'd actually do it." He handed her a coffee cup. "Stubborn. Independent." Same thing, but he was smiling, ready to begin. They started with the scale drawing. Sienna worked while Thuron watched, asking occasional questions but mostly staying quiet, letting her focus. She photographed every inch under various lighting conditions, documented the paper composition, analyzed the pencil marks under magnification. The work was absorbing, demanding complete concentration, and she lost track of time until Lucia knocked softly to announce lunch. "Already," Sienna glanced at her watch. 4 hours had passed. "You were completely absorbed," Thuron observed. "You didn't even notice when Marco came in to check the security system." "Marco was here." "For 20 minutes. You looked up once, determined he wasn't a threat, and went back to work." Thuron's expression was amused. "It's fascinating watching you work. You disappear into it completely." Heat crept up Sienna's neck. "I should be more aware of my surroundings." "Why, you're safe here. That's the whole point." He gestured toward the door. "Come eat. Lucia made enough food to feed an army, and she'll be offended if we don't at least try." Lunch was set up in a sunroom overlooking the gardens. Fresh bread, aged cheeses, a salad with ingredients that had probably been picked that morning, and some kind of pasta dish that smelled incredible. Thuron poured wine without asking if she wanted any, and Sienna found herself accepting the glass. "Tell me about the skeel," he said. "What have you found so far?" "Everything looks authentic. The paper is consistent with the period, the pencil work matches his technique, even the aging patterns are right. I'll need to do more research on the provenance documentation, but physically, it's genuine." "You sound surprised." "I suppose I expected to find at least one forgery. Collections this valuable usually have at least one problem piece." "My grandfather was careful, obsessive actually. He documented everything, verified everything, never bought on impulse." Thuron broke off a piece of bread. "Of course, he also acquired some pieces through channels that wouldn't pass scrutiny today, which is why I need your authentication. Times change. What was acceptable in 1960 isn't acceptable now." "How did he really acquire them? The unconventional channels you mentioned?" Thuron studied her for a moment, as if deciding how much to share. "My family has always operated in gray areas. During the war, my great-grandfather helped move art and valuables for people fleeing Europe. Sometimes they paid him, sometimes they gave him pieces in exchange for safe passage. After the war, my grandfather continued the business, buying and selling through private channels. Not illegal, exactly, but not entirely transparent either. And now? Now I'm trying to legitimize everything, clean up the family legacy, make sure every piece can withstand scrutiny, hence the exhibition." He took a sip of wine. Gregor doesn't understand that. He thinks I'm like my grandfather, hiding things, keeping secrets. He can't accept that I actually want transparency. What happened between your family and his? Our grandfathers were rivals, both in the same business, both competing for the same pieces. When the Caravaggio disappeared, Gregor's grandfather claimed my grandfather stole it. No proof, just accusations. The feud has continued ever since, even though everyone from that generation is dead now. That's insane. That's family, Thuron's mouth twisted. Some grudges outlive the people who started them. Sienna thought about the men at the gate, that unsettling smile. What will happen at the exhibition, if Gregor doesn't find his Caravaggio? Hopefully nothing. He'll see that I was telling the truth, and we can finally put this to rest. Thuron didn't sound entirely convinced. But if he refuses to accept it, then we'll deal with that when it happens. Deal with it how? I have lawyers, good ones, and I have documentation proving every piece I own. If Gregor wants to make this a legal battle, he'll lose. His gray eyes met hers. I won't let it touch you, Sienna. Whatever happens between him and me, you're off limits. You can't control what he does. No, but I can make sure he understands the consequences of involving you. Trust me, he's not stupid enough to cross certain lines. The certainty in his voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it reminded Sienna of how different their worlds were. She dealt with paint and canvas. He dealt with threats and consequences and lines that shouldn't be crossed. After lunch, she returned to the studio and worked until early evening. The skeel was followed by preliminary examination of the Kandinsky, a stunning piece from 1911. All bold colors and abstract forms that seemed to vibrate with energy. Thuron brought her tea without being asked, kept the studio at the perfect temperature, and somehow knew when she needed quiet versus when she'd welcome conversation. It was unsettling how easy it felt working here, how comfortable. When she finally packed up her equipment, the sky outside had darkened to deep purple. Thuron appeared in the doorway as she was pulling on her jacket. Staying late on your first day, I'm impressed. I got absorbed. It happens. Sienna shouldered her bag. I'll be back Friday. I want to run some material tests on the Kandinsky, and I need to research the provenance documentation for both pieces. Whatever you need. The library has an extensive collection of reference materials, and you have full access. He walked with her toward the front of the house. Did you eat anything besides lunch? I'm fine. That's not what I asked. I'll grab something at home. Thuron stopped walking. Lucia made extra dinner. It's already packed up in the kitchen. You're taking it with you. I don't need. Sienna, his voice was gentle but firm. You worked for 9 hours. You barely touched your lunch because you were thinking about the skeel, and I saw you skip the tea I brought because you were focused on the Kandinsky. You need to eat. I can take care of myself. I know you can, but why should you have to when someone's offering to help? He tilted his head. Is it really so terrible accepting something from me? Put that way, it sounded childish to refuse. Fine, but I'm not making a habit of it. Of course not. You're far too independent for that. But he was smiling as he led her to the kitchen, where Lucia had indeed packed up enough food for several meals in neat containers. Marco appeared to walk her to her car, and Sienna noticed he did a complete sweep of the vehicle before letting her get in, checking the backseat, under the chassis, even popping the hood to look at the engine. Is that really necessary? She asked. Mr. Castellane's orders. Any vehicle on the property gets checked before it leaves. Marco's expression was apologetic. Just being careful. Careful? That word again, as if danger was so commonplace it required constant vigilance. Sienna slid into the driver's seat, very aware of Thuron watching from the doorway, backlit by the house's warm light. She texted him when she got home, made it safely. Your paranoia is noted. His response, not paranoia if they're actually watching. Sleep well, Piccola. She wanted to be annoyed by his protectiveness, but instead she found herself smiling as she heated up Lucia's food, some kind of braised chicken that tasted even better than it smelled. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm. Sienna worked at the estate 3 days a week, sometimes 4 when a piece required extended analysis. She authenticated the Kandinsky, moved on to what turned out to be an early Rothko, not his famous color fields but a surrealist piece from the 1940s that made her breath catch. Each discovery was thrilling, each piece more remarkable than the last. And through it all, Thuron was there. Not hovering, but present, bringing her coffee that was always the right temperature, knowing when she needed silence to concentrate and when she'd welcome discussion about a particular piece. He never touched her beyond the occasional brush of hands when passing documents, never pushed beyond the professional boundaries she'd set, but the tension between them built like a physical thing. She caught him watching her sometimes, when he thought she was absorbed in her work. The intensity in his gaze made her skin prickle with awareness, made her wonder what would happen if she acknowledged it, if she stopped pretending she didn't feel the same pull. But she maintained the boundaries, kept things professional, ignored the way her pulse raced when he leaned over her shoulder to look at something under magnification, close enough that she could feel his warmth, smell that sandalwood scent that had become achingly familiar. Friday of the 3rd week, everything changed. Sienna was examining a Miro painting when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her check. The message was simple. We should talk about your employer. Coffee. No name, no context, but somehow she knew. Gregor's people. Her hands went cold. She set down her tools and walked to find Thuron, who was in his office dealing with paperwork. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway, and his expression shifted immediately. What's wrong? She held out her phone. He read the message, his jaw tightening, then pulled out his own phone and made a call. Marco, I need you to check Sienna's phone for tracking software. Yes, now. Her personal cell. He covered the phone. Give it to Marco when he gets here, and from now on, you communicate with me only through the secure line I'm about to give you. Thuron, this is. This is them trying to get to you, exactly what I warned you about. His voice was hard. Did you respond? No. Good, don't. Don't engage, don't acknowledge. Marco will handle it. 15 minutes later, Marco had her phone disassembled on Thuron's desk, running some kind of diagnostic software. No tracking that I can see, but they got her number somehow, probably from the gallery. It's on their website. Can you trace the message? Burner phone, dead end. Marco reassembled Sienna's phone, but I can set up monitoring, see if they try again. Thuron nodded, then turned to Sienna. I'm sorry, I knew this might happen, but I'd hoped. It's fine, I'm fine. But her voice shook slightly. What do I do if they contact me again? Nothing, you tell me immediately and we handle it. These people are professionals at manipulation, Sienna. They'll try to make you doubt me, offer you money, maybe even suggest I'm dangerous and they're trying to protect you. Don't believe any of it. I'm not an idiot. I know you're not, but they're very good at what they do. He ran a hand through his hair. That gesture she'd learned meant he was stressed. Maybe we should postpone the exhibition. Give this time to settle. No, the word came out fiercer than she intended. I'm not letting them scare me off. I have work to finish. Something shifted in Thuron's expression. Surprise, maybe respect. You're sure? I'm sure. I don't run from threats and I don't leave work unfinished. She met his gaze squarely. Besides, isn't that what they want? To disrupt your exhibition, to keep you from proving you don't have their Caravaggio. A slow smile spread across his face. There's that backbone. I knew it was there. You're not the only one who can be stubborn. Clearly. He glanced at Marco. Double security. I want to know if anyone comes within a mile of this property who doesn't belong here. And get me everything you can find on recent activity from Gregor's organization. Marco nodded and left. Alone with Thuron, Sienna felt the adrenaline start to fade, replaced by a delayed wave of anxiety. She'd been threatened. Someone had got her personal number, was trying to manipulate her into, what? Betraying Thuron, spying on the collection. Hey, Thuron's voice was soft. He'd moved closer without her noticing. You're shaking. I'm fine. Stop saying that. You're allowed to be scared. I'm not scared, I'm angry. And she was anger burning through the anxiety, hot and clarifying. Who do they think they are, trying to intimidate me? I haven't done anything wrong. No, you haven't, but they don't care about right or wrong. They care about getting what they want. His hand came up, hesitated, then gently touched her shoulder. Come on, let's get you some air. He led her outside to the gardens, where the autumn afternoon was clear and bright. They walked in silence for a while, Thuron's hand still on her shoulder, steadying her. Eventually, they reached a bench overlooking a pond where swans glided serenely across the water. My mother planted these gardens, Thuron said quietly. After my father died, she needed something to nurture, something beautiful that couldn't be touched by the ugliness of our world. It was the first time he'd mentioned his parents. What happened to him? Car accident, or that's what it was ruled. I was 12. His voice was carefully neutral. My mother never believed it was an accident. She thought it was connected to the business, to one of my father's rivals. She could never prove it, but it ate at her until she died 5 years later. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago, but it taught me something important, that the world we operate in has costs, real ones, and the people we care about pay those costs even when they shouldn't have to. He turned to look at her. That's why I need you to understand what you're dealing with. Why I need you to be careful. I am being careful. Are you? You drove yourself here today instead of letting Marco pick you up. You keep your personal cell phone on instead of using the secure line. You resist every security measure I try to put in place. Because I'm not going to live in fear. There's a difference between living in fear and taking reasonable precautions. His hand moved from her shoulder to cup her face, the touch so unexpected that her breath caught. I can't lose you to my family's mistakes, Sienna. I won't. The intensity in his voice, in his touch, in those storm-gray eyes, made something crack open inside her chest. Thuron. I know, professional boundaries. You've made that very clear. But he didn't move his hand. But I need you to understand that keeping you safe isn't professional for me. It's personal, deeply, completely personal. We agreed. I agreed to try. I never said I'd succeed. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Do you have any idea how hard it's been, watching you work, seeing you get excited about some detail in a painting, listening to you talk about conservation techniques with that passion in your voice? Do you know what it does to me when you bite your lip because you're concentrating, or when you forget to eat because you're absorbed in your work? Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs. This isn't, we shouldn't. I know, you're right, we shouldn't. But he leaned closer, close enough that she could feel his breath against her lips. Tell me to stop. Tell me you don't feel this too, and I'll walk away. I'll keep every boundary you've set, just tell me. She should tell him. Should push him away, remind him of her conditions, maintain the professional distance that was the only safe thing about this entire arrangement. Instead, she kissed him. Or maybe he kissed her. It was impossible to tell who moved first, who closed that final distance, but suddenly his mouth was on hers and nothing else mattered. He kissed like he did everything else, with complete focus, total intensity, as if she was the only thing in the world worth his attention. His hands slid into her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss, and Sienna heard herself make a sound she'd never made before, desperate and hungry, and completely beyond her control. She grabbed his sweater, pulling him closer, and he responded by lifting her onto his lap on the bench, positioning her so she straddled him, her skirt riding up as she settled against him. Sienna, he breathed against her mouth. God, Sienna. She kissed him again, harder this time, and felt him groan. His hands moved to her waist, holding her steady, and she could feel every hard plane of his body against hers, could feel exactly how much he wanted her. It was intoxicating, terrifying, perfect. A phone rang somewhere, Thuron's. He ignored it. It rang again, insistent, and finally he pulled back with a curse. I have to. He checked the screen, his expression darkening. It's Marco, something's wrong. Reality came crashing back. Sienna scrambled off his lap, smoothing her skirt with shaking hands, her lips swollen and her body still thrumming with need. Thuron answered the phone, his voice clipped and professional, while she tried to remember how to breathe normally. When, how many, No, keep her there, I'm coming now. He ended the call, his jaw tight. Gregor's people are at your apartment, 2 of them trying to get your landlord to let them in. Ice flooded Sienna's veins. What? Marco has someone watching your building. They showed up 20 minutes ago with some story about being concerned friends. He stood, pulling her with him. You're not going home tonight. You're staying here. I can't just. Sienna, they know where you live. They're actively trying to get into your apartment. You're not safe there. His hands gripped her shoulders. Please, just for tonight, let me keep you safe. She wanted to argue, to insist she could handle herself. But the fear was real now, sharp and immediate. These people were at her home, trying to get inside, and she had no idea what they wanted or how far they'd go. Okay, she whispered, just for tonight. The relief in Thuron's eyes was palpable. Thank you, come on, Lucia will set up a guest room. As they walked back to the house, Sienna's mind raced. She'd kissed him. She'd kissed Thuron Castlane, her employer, the dangerous man she'd promised herself to keep at professional distance. And it had been incredible, world-tilting, the kind of kiss that changed everything. And now she was staying at his estate, sleeping under his roof, with the taste of him still on her lips and the memory of his hands on her waist burning into her skin. Professional boundaries. She'd had those once, hadn't she? Now they lay in ruins around her feet, and she had no idea how to rebuild them. Or if she even wanted to. The guest room was beautiful, all soft linens and warm lighting, with windows overlooking the gardens now bathed in moonlight. Lucia had provided pajamas, toiletries, everything Sienna might need. But she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt Thuron's hands in her hair, tasted him on her lips, remembered the desperate sound he'd made when she'd kissed him. Around midnight, she gave up and padded downstairs in bare feet, drawn by light spilling from under the library door. Thuron sat in an armchair, a book forgotten in his lap, staring into the fireplace. He'd changed into dark pants and a white t-shirt that revealed the lean muscle of his arms. He looked up when she entered, something raw and unguarded flickering across his face. Can't sleep either, he asked quietly. Too much adrenaline. She moved closer, drawn like a magnet. Any update on my apartment? They left an hour ago. Marco's people will watch it overnight. He set aside the book. I've been thinking about what happens next. And I want you to stay here, not just tonight until after the exhibition. It's safer and you're here most days anyway. He held up a hand before she could protest. Separate rooms, complete privacy. I won't touch you again unless you ask me to. Thuron, I know I crossed a line today. I know you set boundaries and I ignored them. He stood, closing the distance between them. But I can't regret it, Sienna. I can't regret finally knowing what you taste like, how you feel in my arms, even if it can never happen again. Her heart hammered. Who says it can't? Hope flared in his eyes, quickly suppressed. You did. Professional relationship, remember. That was before someone tried to break into my apartment, before I realized how deep I'm already in this. She stepped closer, close enough to touch. Before I admitted that I haven't stopped thinking about you since that night at the gala. Sienna, her name was a warning, a plea. I'm tired of being careful, tired of playing it safe. She placed her hand on his chest, felt his heart racing beneath her palm. You were right. Safe isn't the same as alive, and I feel more alive with you than I have in years. He caught her hand, pressed it harder against his heart. If we do this, there's no going back. You understand that. Once I have you, really have you, I won't want to let you go. Then don't. Something broke in him. He pulled her against him, one hand tangling in her hair, the other splayed across her lower back. Are you sure? Because once I start, I won't be able to stop. I'm sure. He kissed her then, not gentle like before, but hungry, claiming, as if he'd been holding back for weeks and finally couldn't anymore. Sienna kissed him back with equal desperation, her hands sliding under his shirt to feel the warm skin beneath, the hard muscle that flexed under her touch. Thuron lifted her easily, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her toward the stairs. My room, he murmured against her mouth. I want you in my bed. Yes. His bedroom was all dark wood and masculine elegance, but Sienna barely noticed. He laid her on the bed with surprising gentleness, then stood back, his chest heaving, eyes dark with desire. Last chance to change your mind. I'm not changing my mind. She sat up, pulling off the borrowed pajama top. Stop talking and come here. He did. Morning light filtered through curtains, warm against Sienna's skin. She woke wrapped around Thuron, his arm heavy across her waist, his breath steady against her neck. Everything ached in the best possible way. You're awake, he murmured, his lips brushing her shoulder. I can tell by the way you're breathing. How long have you been awake? An hour, watching you sleep. His arm tightened. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and this will have been a dream. If it's a dream, we're both having it. He rolled her onto her back, bracing himself above her. And the tenderness in his expression made her chest ache. I meant what I said last night. I'm not letting you go. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. They stayed in bed until Lucia knocked softly, announcing breakfast and reminding Thuron he had a conference call. Reality intruded slowly, but Sienna found she didn't mind. She showered in Thuron's bathroom, borrowed one of his shirts, and eventually made her way down to find him in his office, hair still damp, looking unfairly attractive while discussing shipping logistics. He saw her, his expression softening, and ended the call quickly. Come here. She went, letting him pull her onto his lap, settling against him like it was the most natural thing in the world. I have news, he said. Marco traced the men at your apartment. They work directly for Gregor. Her stomach tightened, and I called Gregor myself this morning. Told him if he or his people came near you again, I'd release documentation proving he's been smuggling art through false provenance for the last decade. Do you actually have that documentation? I do now. Marco's very thorough. Thuron's smile was sharp. Gregor's agreed to back off. He'll attend the exhibition as planned, will see for himself that I don't have his Caravaggio, and then this ends. Just like that. Just like that, mutually assured destruction has a way of encouraging cooperation. His hand stroked her back. You're safe now, I made sure of it. Relief flooded through her. Thank you. Don't thank me for protecting what's mine. Is that what I am? Yours? Completely, he kissed her softly. If you'll have me. I'll have you. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. Sienna completed the authentication of all 15 pieces, every one genuine, properly documented, ready for exhibition. She moved into Thuron's estate officially, her apartment lease ending anyway, and found that living with him was surprisingly easy. He gave her space when she needed it, was there when she wanted company, and made her laugh in quiet moments between the intensity. The exhibition night arrived with perfect autumn weather. The ballroom had been transformed into a gallery space, each piece displayed with museum-quality lighting and security. Guests arrived in expensive cars, collectors, curators, gallery owners, all the people who mattered in the art world. And Gregor Vassil, who arrived exactly on time, his huge bodyguard in tow. Sienna stood beside Thuron as Gregor approached, her hand finding his. Gregor was older than she'd expected, maybe 60, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Castellane, his voice carried a thick accent. So you actually did it, a public exhibition. As promised, every piece authenticated by Sienna Roth, one of the best conservators in the country. Thuron's voice was calm, professional. You're welcome to examine the documentation. You'll find no Caravaggio. Gregor's gaze shifted to Sienna, assessing. You checked everything, thoroughly. Every piece, full authentication, provenance research, materials analysis. Nothing was hidden from my examination. She met his eyes steadily. There's no Caravaggio in this collection. For a long moment, Gregor studied her. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. You have honest eyes, I believe you. He turned back to Thuron. It seems I was wrong. My grandfather's accusations were misguided. Understandable, given the circumstances. Thuron extended his hand. Can we put this behind us? Gregor stared at the offered hand, then slowly shook it. We can, but know this, if I ever find proof you lied, this truce ends. You won't find proof of something that doesn't exist. After Gregor left, Sienna sagged against Thuron. Is it really over? It's really over. He kissed her temple. You did brilliantly, by the way, very professional. I learned from the best. The rest of the evening was a triumph. The pieces drew universal acclaim, and Sienna found herself fielding questions about conservation techniques, discussing her findings with curators who seemed genuinely impressed. Gerald beamed, already talking about future collaborations. Even Margit, who'd arrived fashionably late, had to admit the whole thing was incredible. Okay, fine, Margit whispered, pulling Sienna aside. I was wrong about him. He looks at you like you hung the moon. Sienna glanced across the room to where Thuron stood discussing the Rothko with a museum curator, but his eyes found hers immediately, that slight smile playing at his lips. I know, she said softly. Later, after the guests had left and the staff had cleaned up, Sienna and Thuron stood alone in the ballroom. She'd kicked off her heels, her feet aching from hours of standing, and he'd loosened his tie, looking more relaxed than she'd seen him all evening. We did it, she said. You did it, I just provided the art. He pulled her close, swaying slightly to music only they could hear. I have something for you. Thuron, you've already given me so much. Not a gift, a question. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box, and her breath stopped. I know it's fast. I know we've only really been together a few weeks, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Thuron. He opened the box, revealing a ring, simple, elegant, with a single perfect diamond. Marry me, Sienna, not because it's practical or safe, but because I love you. Because you're brave and brilliant and you make me want to be better. Because when you sat in my lap that night and didn't flinch, I knew you were it for me. Tears blurred her vision. That's the most ridiculous proposal I've ever heard. Is that a yes? Yes, you idiot, of course it's yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, then lifted her, spinning her around as she laughed. When he set her down, his kiss was tender, full of promise. I love you, he whispered. My stubborn, independent, brilliant Piccola. I love you too. She pulled back to look at him. Even though you're overprotective and bossy, and you called me Piccola again. I'll never stop calling you that. I know, she kissed him again. I'm counting on it. Outside, the autumn moon rose over the gardens, casting silver light across the grounds. Inside, wrapped in Thuron's arms, Sienna thought about how far she'd come from that night at the gala. How one accident, one moment of sitting in the wrong chair, had changed everything. She'd stopped playing it safe. She'd taken a risk on a dangerous man with storm-gray eyes and a guarded heart. And in return, she'd found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. She'd found home. What are you thinking? Thuron asked. That I'd sit in your lap again, anytime, anywhere. His laugh rumbled through his chest. Good, because I'm never letting you get up. And as he kissed her again, Sienna knew he meant it. She was his and he was hers, and whatever came next, they'd face it together. Professional boundaries be damned.